Well, President Biden got some bad news on his big day. Just hours before his DNC speech tonight, House Republican investigators have asserted that Biden did engage in impeachable conduct. The long-awaited impeachment inquiry first report alleges that the president's family raked in more than $27 million in recent years through foreign business dealings. The report by the House Oversight, Judiciary, and Ways and Means Committees argues that it's inconceivable that Biden was ignorant of how his family members allegedly used their ties to him as a way to boost deals in Ukraine, China, and elsewhere. The report accuses Biden of having, quote, participated in a conspiracy to monetize his office of public trust to enrich his family, amounting to abuse of power. The nearly 300-page report goes through bank records, over 30 subpoenas, and several hearings. It also alleges that Biden obstructed Republicans' investigations and that Biden, quote, may be impeached for the actions of subordinate officials. To be clear, the report does not show Biden directly receiving money from his family's business dealings or prove he changed any U.S. policies to aid his family.
A White House spokesperson told The Hill, quote, after wasting nearly 2 years and millions of taxpayer dollars, House Republicans have finally given up on their wild goose chase. This failed stunt will only be remembered for how it became an embarrassment that their own members distanced themselves from, as they only managed to turn up evidence that refuted their false and baseless conspiracy theories. The report stopped short of recommending impeachment articles. So I do think that it's good that I don't think it was a wild goose chase, first of all. I think that it was clear that there was some kind of corruption going on, that this was something worth looking into. If there's foreign business deals going on, of course Congress should investigate. It's kind of crazy to assume that they wouldn't. And it's reasonable to conclude them now that we know that Biden himself wasn't a decision maker.
Right.
He can't be responsible for what his son did.
Now, the report emphasizes its conclusion is that Biden did directly profit from what Hunter Biden was doing. The media reaction and analysis of that is that it was not proven. Obviously, you can read the report, decide for yourself. What it did show was that Joe Biden called into a number of business dinners and meetings that Hunter Biden was a part of. 20 times at least this happened, where he was on the phone with Joe and Hunter were on the phone as the business associates were present. He also met a Russian oligarch at a dinner. There's a line in there about him saying to the people, I mean, this is so characteristic of Biden, him saying, "You treat my boy right. You look out for my son," in his kind of folksy Biden-y way. And what they're alleging was that's Biden was the product, he was what was being sold. I think a reasonable person is going to conclude from this that there isn't enough direct evidence to say that Joe Biden was in on this scheme, that he was a financial beneficiary. Rather, he was being taken advantage of by his son, who was involved in all of these corrupt dealings, including, we now know, trying to lobby the ambassador to Italy so he could have Burisma meet with officials in the Tuscany region, not to open a winery, but to open some kind of energy-related thing. So this effort has been underway for a long time. There is not actually enough Republican support to formally impeach Joe Biden, let alone in the Senate, where it would go nowhere because Democrats control the Senate, so there would not actually be an impeachment vote taking, or a removal vote taking place. Interestingly enough, this is the first time to have a House committee arrive at this impeachment decision without having, if the chamber doesn't end up voting on it, without the chamber voting on it. The only time the chamber did not end up voting on such a matter was in the case of Nixon, when he resigned before that could happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, they've got to be able to prove with evidence that what they're saying happened. Hearsay, and having Biden referred to as the big guy in transactions where there were millions of dollars on the line, it's just not enough. And so I think if they had that, they probably would have moved forward with impeachment. But they don't, and that's the main thing here, is they were trying to track down financial transactions that people said it would be impossible to track these down. But we do know that it's possible to find overseas accounts. We've just found that Coca-Cola has an overseas account where they've been hiding billions of dollars trying to evade taxes. The Panama Papers, it's possible for rich people to hide their money and do transactions in a way that are not traceable. So it's possible that there's evidence out there that exists, but they didn't find any. And so I think, wasting additional time in pursuing this and further investigation is probably not something that Congress is equipped to do. But there should be some branch of the U.S. government that's able to track these financial transactions. I find it hard to believe that the CIA and FBI are just wholly incapable of that.
Well, conservatives are going to wonder whether the deep state wants to properly investigate Joe Biden, if they're capable of actually investigating Democrats. Is it just solely focused on the wrongdoings of Trump and Republicans? But really, I think a lot of energy to move forward with this has been sapped by the fact that Joe Biden is no longer running for re-election and is going to cease to be the president in a few months. Frankly, I think even a lot of the Republican enthusiasm to prosecute him is over. We should admit it can be legitimate and political. Sometimes there's criminal wrongdoing and it is politically beneficial to one side. The reality is that Republicans are now going to be focused on how to stop Kamala Harris, how to thwart her agenda, how to defeat her in terms of the election. Biden is just falling off the radar very rapidly.
Yeah, I really wish we had a Congress that cared about corruption whenever it happened and would investigate this until they found evidence and took as much of a liking to Hunter Biden's story, to Jared Kushner's story about getting a $2 billion investment from the Saudis for his hedge fund, for his investment firm. If they really cared about corruption and foreign dealings of our government at the highest level, they would have cared as much about Jared Kushner as they cared about Hunter Biden. They would have been investigating that as well. They would have continued this investigation to try and at least track down that money, to direct the FBI or the CIA to try and track down those financial transactions where it seems that Hunter Biden himself indicated that, yes, Joe Biden was the big guy back in February. And so
who else is the big guy?
Yeah,
I think
right.
It's Joe Biden.
Yeah, there's a lot of big guys out there, but it seems that Hunter Biden suggested it was his father. So I just wish they took it seriously. It's sad to see that at the end of the day, it's political, and when he's no longer the nominee, they don't care.
I still can't believe, with all the evidence we have now for the corruption on Hunter Biden's part, for how desperate he was to convince foreign business dealers that he had a direct line to his president and he could sell access to his father. That was all going on. That is all now so well established. And he has still been close enough. Joe Biden never kept him at arm's length at any point. Up until, a month and a half ago, as there was pressure mounting on Joe Biden to drop out, we were still learning that he was relying on advice from Mrs. Biden and from Hunter. His inner circle, Hunter. This is someone whose corruption was so obvious, so well established, and who still was in a position of informal, yes, I'm not saying it's criminal, but informally advising his dad to stick it out when he has so much tremendous personal financial reasons for dad to continue being the president, both in terms of getting him out of his legal problems, if a pardon comes along, and in terms of the financial ties that he had. So I think it goes to show, I think it is remarkable that Joe Biden didn't keep Hunter at a more distant position.
Well, let's not
saying
forget
it's impeachable, it just seems bad.
Trump should be disqualified for having Jared Kushner in a decision-making role. Absolutely. Yeah. When we think about how much influence Jared Kushner had under the Trump administration, this seems like payment for duties done when he was serving in the Trump administration, this $2 billion from the
I got to say, Jared Kushner is not very popular with people on the right, as far as I can tell. That was, I think, the first, for grassroots, very conservative MAGA people who supported Trump, the first sign that things were going awry was when he put Jared Kushner in charge of so many of his policies, someone who had no affinity for right-wing populism or what conservatives really wanted, who was not, who was even less of a conservative than Donald Trump. Now, the hope is, and the promise has been, that Kushner, et cetera, will have no role in the next Trump administration. So we're gonna do the real MAGA policies, not going to be obstructed by these Democrats in Republican clothing anymore.
I just think it's a weird vibe that in a country where we hate kings, we don't like Britain for this reason. This is how we got our independence. We still accept the existence of political dynasties, the Kennedys, the Bushes, the Clintons, having Trump have all of his family members and their loved ones in his cabinet. It's just like, we got to get away from this in the interest of freedom, in the interest of America.
No kings and queens. Although you're in a very royal monarchical jacket today, I would say.
I said it was a Hugh Hefner jacket, which is also unfortunately very American.
I actually said it was a pirate jacket.
You did say
it's giving me Captain Hook vibes. All right, that is it for this segment. Coming up next, we'll check in at the DNC. Stay tuned.